The G-Saviour film is perhaps the strangest footnote in the original Gundam timeline. Even among Gundam fans, it's not a film that many go out of their way to go see. And those who have seen it sometimes question themselves if what they saw was really a Gundam film or a film made by the Asylum Studio, the same film studio that made films like Transmorphers, Hornet, and Atlantic Rim. But it's not. G-Saviour is actually real, and it is considered canon within Gundam's Universal Century timeline. Or at least it sort of is, because Sunrise doesn't even like talking about it. I wouldn't exactly go as far as to call it bad, but mostly forgettable. The characters and mobile suit designs fail to stand out compared to anything that came before or ever since, and the story mainly plays it safe. It also takes place so far into the timeline that the Universal Century is almost unrecognizable. Gone are the days of the Federation and Zeon, and even the later Crossbone Vanguard and Victory Gundam. But what about the game? Is the game just as forgettable, or does it manage to stand out on its own somehow? G-Saviour, the video game, was released in September of 2000 for the PlayStation 2 and acts as a sequel to the film of the same name. The story takes place 1 year after the events of the film, but doesn't include any of the same characters. The G-Saviour isn't even piloted by the film's protagonist. Before getting started, it's important to know that the autosave function is turned off by default, and at no point during the campaign will you be asked to save the game manually. To fix this, you'll need to go into the options menu to turn on autosave. This is also the only place where you can change the difficulty settings. The game is on easy mode by default, which I would recommend newer players leave it as is because there are some difficulty spikes further into the campaign.
Universal Century, Year 223. Winter. Following its victory over the military aggression of General Garneau of the Congressional Armed Force, CAF, Side Gaia earned its independence as Side 8 and has been endorsed.
After a short intro video, the game opens up with some narration explaining the plot, but it makes a mistake in assuming that everyone who plays the game has already seen the film. It throws out names of characters and locations from the film that not even I remember, even though I myself have seen the movie. Then again, to be fair, they did add 3 short videos in the main menu under Premium that recaps the events of the film. Also, this brings me to a very interesting fact about this game. Bad or questionable voice acting aside, did you catch anything odd in the narration for this game that was only released for Japanese audiences and that was never sold in the West?
Illuminati, a secret group of warriors sworn to restore peace in the troubled Earth terrain, has launched the Lightning Squad to stop Project Raven.
Although I am playing on an emulator, this is not some kind of English patch. The entire game's dialogue was in fact recorded in English. Anyway, the story is that after the film's antagonists were defeated, they then decided to ramp up development on Project Raven in order to create mobile weapons. Basically this game's version of unmanned mobile dolls from Gundam Wing. This catches the attention of a group called Illuminati, a faction consisting of fighters sworn to bring peace to the world. The Illuminati send their forces to Earth to track down Project Raven and put a stop to it. And we soon meet Reed, the new pilot of the G-Saviour, who we play as. To be honest, for a while I sort of figured he was the same protagonist from the film, but he isn't. Now, before we go any further, and it seems like I may or may not dislike this game, I do have to bring up one real bright spot about this game, and that is that this game actually has levels for all the missions, whereas basically every, or at least 90% of all Gundam games only have arena-based missions. This means that you'll never have to worry about hitting an invisible wall, or accidentally stepping too far out of bounds, or an enemy running past the invisible wall where you can't hit it, but it can still hit you. Moving on to the controls. To move around, we use the left analog stick. We can also hover by pressing down on L3. The camera is moved around with the right analog stick, but to be honest, it doesn't really work all that well. To dodge or quickstep, we simply press down on the L2 trigger. Our main weapon is fired by pressing either square or R1. There is no button dedicated to melee. Melee in this game works by pressing down on the regular fire button whenever you're close to an enemy and not in hover mode. But keep in mind that enemies can melee you as well. The special weapon attack is used by pressing triangle. All suits minus the G-Saviour have a special weapon. Pressing down circle also uses a separate special attack, where it basically carpet bombs everything along your path. I almost never use this attack because it's a little difficult to aim properly, And also, since I'm playing on an emulator, for some reason, the screen tends to glitch out a little whenever there's a big explosion. There is one instance, however, where this ability comes in handy, which I'll explain later on when we get to it. To block with your shield, simply press L1 or X. Your guard meter is measured in yellow in the top right corner of the screen. When the shield meter goes down, to recover, simply let go of the shield button until it recovers all the way. For me, I found that using R1 to shoot and L1 to guard worked best since you can guard and shoot at the same time. Lastly, your health is shown in red in the upper right hand corner. Although it may appear at first glance like you have a lot of it, the reality is that you could only take about 3 to 4 hits, possibly even less if you're hit from behind or with the melee. As for the graphics in this game, since it is an early PlayStation 2 title, it doesn't look all that great. In fact, it sort of reminds me a little of Slave Zero from the Sega Dreamcast. That may be good for the Dreamcast era, but this is the PlayStation 2 we're talking about. Armored Core 2 was also released in the same year with superior graphics, and for the same console. Since this game is based off of a live-action film and not an anime, the cutscenes also have low-resolution images of the character actors for the dialogue scenes. And when I say low resolution, I mean it. All pictures of the characters in this game look as if they were taken by an old flip phone from the 2000s. As for the level designs themselves, they're all pretty straightforward and don't have any secret paths or hidden items, unfortunately. But all in all, these level designs work more or less fine. For the first mission, we have to make our way to the spaceport and capture it. And at the very end, we get our first boss fight, as every mission has its own boss fight, and every boss fight has its own arena. The arenas are not exactly a part of the levels leading up to them, as they are separated by either a short load screen or short cutscene, but they all blend pretty well together, and most of the time you won't really notice it. For the first boss, we run into Klaus in his mobile suit called Spearhead, and pretty much every voiced villain talks the same, all accompanied with poor dialogue and generic evil laughs.
Your suits are surprisingly strong. So, all the same, you will never defeat me.
Making me wish for once they never did an English dub for a Gundam game. If all the dialogue was recorded in Japanese, at least then I wouldn't be able to tell how bad the voice acting actually was, because I would be too ignorant to tell the difference between good and bad. To be fair though, I think this game was developed at a time when Gundam had yet to break out in the West. Gundam Wing was still about a year or so away from airing on Toonami, so maybe the studio recording all the lines had little to no direction or reference. Anyway, the first boss is pretty easy. We can easily stun lock him with our basic main weapon, and all we have to do is keep shooting until the fight ends. The second mission takes place in Australia, and there is some mention or hint to the 1-year war, but they only refer to it as the Great War, and that's really the only connection this has with the original anime. The level takes place within some of the colony debris. It's best not to overthink things here. Maybe it is the exact same colony that fell in UC 0079, or maybe it's a different one, because for a fallen colony, there sure is a lot of it left intact. And in 0083, we do see that most of it fell into the ocean. Then again, maybe over 100 years later, the water would have receded and exposed much of the land again. It's best not to dwell on this since it's clear that we won't get any clarity. Visually, this level is mainly filled with different shades of gray and dark gray color palettes, which I suppose is appropriate given the setting. Sunlight and blue sky can be seen breaking in through the cracks, so visually it's not too bad. The boss for this mission is Rises in his Raven mobile suit, no relation to Armored Core. No matter how this plays out, Rises basically wins with one shot every time. We go down, and before he can deliver the final blow, we're saved by a team of G-Saviours.
I enjoyed your company, but I'm afraid it's time to say sayonara, G-Saviour. Damn it, the system's not functioning. Am I gonna die? What? Their supporting unit has arrived? You should thank your guardian angel, G-Saviour. Or should I call you Reed? My name is Rises. Remember, the next time I see you, it will be Judgment Day.
2 weeks pass before our next mission. Reed gets assigned to the G-3rd, the new G-Saviour model. So let's finally talk about the mobile suit designs in this game. They do differ from the ones we see in the film, and they almost resemble the mobile suits we will later see appear in Gundam Seed. Most, if not all, of the enemy mobile suits sort of resemble the ones from Zaft, and the G-3rd is a little similar to the Strike Gundam in Gundam Seed, or the Impulse from Seed Destiny, since its loadout can be changed between missions. I personally think that these designs are an improvement compared to the ones we see in the movie. Admittedly, I have also never been a fan of the G-Saviour's design, so I'm happy they upgraded it for this game. To add to the similarity that the mobile suits have with Gundam Seed, the game's theme song also gives off some Gundam Seed vibes in a way. At least it did for me. This could be subjective, of course. After Inzala also pilots a Gundam named Saviour in Destiny, although I'm pretty sure they're not related. These are from different timelines after all. For the third mission, we have a set amount of time to get to the end of the level, so there is a little more agency in progressing to the end this time around. I've never really been a fan of timed missions because it makes it difficult to be able to enjoy the visuals and explore. For this game, however, there's not much to look at. And as I said earlier, there are no hidden items or secret passages. So this time around, it doesn't bother me at all. The boss for this mission is Kite in the Spearhead C, another mobile suit that looks like it came straight out of the Cosmic era. Just like with the first boss, we just have to keep shooting him into a stun lock until he dies. For Mission 4, we unlock the Intensive Attack mode for the G-3rd. It once again looks like something we would later see in Gundam Seed. This version has 2 cannons on its back that can come in handy, but like all special weapons, the ammo does not reload, and for these cannons they do not lock on, requiring you to free aim every time. This mode is also slower compared to the other loadouts. As for the actual level itself, it's sort of like if the opening stage of Mega Man X and some of the Slave Zero missions were combined into one. The entire mission takes place on a highway, and it's actually my favorite level in the entire game. It has a sort of 90s retro vibe going for it, in my opinion. Which, well, duh. It was made in the late 90s after all. When we reach the boss for this mission, we run into Wright, but he soon runs away and leaves a mobile weapon to distract us. Reed then says some more bad dialogue, and we then fight.
Cold wire robots have no chance of defeating us because we have our souls.
This is where the boss fights start to get a little challenging. The mobile weapon is not entirely difficult, but it does have an attack that can hit us from behind if we're not careful. My first attempt technically ended in a draw, but since my health also dropped to 0, the game just registered it as a loss. So for the second time, I just basically nuked everything in front of me. Reed then gets triggered from having to fight a mobile weapon.
Weapons are simply slaughter machines without a soul. When our universe in jeopardy, war becomes a game.
Although this plot and dialogue were not written too well, I do have to admit that the idea is a lot more interesting than the plot we got in the movie. A plot surrounding mobile weapons taking over the jobs of human soldiers may not have automatically saved the film, but it at least might have been more interesting than trying to create artificial sunlight to help with agriculture. Not that agriculture isn't important, it is, just for the record. The ground attack mode is unlocked for the next mission. This might arguably be the best mode for the G-3rd, as it has unlimited boost and comes with a pretty powerful main weapon. The lock-on missiles also help out a lot, despite not doing a lot of damage. The only downside to this mode is that it doesn't have a lot of HP. This mission is also timed, but the time limit is pretty forgiving. We also see some variety in the level design being shown here, by having the mission take place in the snow. We have to take out a shield generator at Kilimanjaro by infiltrating it from an alternate route, while our main force distracts the main enemy forces. The boss for this mission is Win in his Spearhead B. Pretty much all the boss enemy suits are called Spearheads, but with different letters. I have to say at this point, despite any shortcomings the game may have, the game's artists really knocked it out of the park with some of these MS designs. This fight is fairly easy. It can be a little annoying when electricity comes out from the ground and forces you to change course. Aside from that, it's a simple, straightforward fight. The next mission sort of makes a subtle hint to Victory Gundam by mentioning how a certain large object fell from the sky some 70 years ago. I'm assuming it's Victory Gundam anyway, since 70 years ago, before the events of the game, sort of puts it around the time of Victory Gundam. But that's as close as it gets to making a connection. This mission isn't necessarily hard as much as it is long. At least that's how it felt for me. The design and color palette of the level could also be the reason why it felt longer for me. There's not much to look at, as it all takes place inside. I die around 3 times on this level, and it's usually around the same location. There are enemies practically everywhere, on the ground, on the walls, and on the ceiling, which brings me to the game's biggest flaw. There are no checkpoints for any of the levels. If you die at any point, regardless if it's towards the end of the level, you will have to restart from the beginning of the level. For this mission's boss, we had to fight against 2 mobile weapons this time around. When I first played this game, this was perhaps the most difficult boss because there is a beam that fires from the middle of the map that you need to dodge in addition to dodging attacks from both mobile weapons. But I learned that boosting to the left, there is a place we can take cover behind while creating some distance between us and the mobile weapons. Simply get there as fast as you can and wait for the enemy to approach from the right. Take it out as quickly as possible, then focus on the last enemy while staying behind cover. You can move up a little to bait the AI to get closer within your firing range, but just make sure to jump back into cover before the beam fires back up again. Mission 7 is perhaps the weakest of the entire game. It's really just a repeat of Mission 4, where you have to make your way through the highway, and it's exactly the same highway. The only difference is that now it has some damage done to it. And then there's the fact that the enemies are slightly tougher. Don't get me wrong, I do like the level design, but I can't deny that it's exactly the same, and is basically just filler content. The boss here is right, the same guy who ran away and left the mobile weapon for us to fight against earlier. His suit kind of resembles the Zaku 3 a little. Even though he doesn't look it, he is a fast one, and if we're not careful, he can take us out pretty quickly. The best way to take him out is to do the same as with the mobile weapon he left for us to fight the first time around. Just spam the cannons and he'll go down quick. Anyway, at the start of Mission 8, we encounter Rises again and exchange some words before he flies away. Although it doesn't make much sense as to why we don't just fight right then and there. We all know that's gonna happen at the end anyway, but Rises flies away nonetheless.
Is it because of me? Did I lead my apprentice, my friend, in the wrong direction? If so, it's my responsibility to straighten this out.
The map for this mission is exactly the same as Mission 2, only with a lot more enemies. And I do mean a lot. I also die about 3 times here as well. There are 2 reasons why I tend to die here. The first are these missiles that have pretty big splash damage. Even if I dodge them, they can still hit me from behind. And remember that dying means you have to start from the beginning. There are no checkpoints for any of the levels. The second reason why I tend to die is because of certain corners. You see, the levels in this game tend to go in a sort of zigzag path. So there will be times when turning a corner where enemies from much further up ahead can still shoot you from behind because there is no sizable wall or barrier to block their line of sight. Compared to other games, I didn't exactly die all that much on this level, but given the fact that there are no checkpoints, this results in losing a lot of time and progress. After a few attempts, I went back to change my loadout, and went with one that had a lot more armor. It was slower, but slow and steady wins the race, as they say. I eventually made enough progress in my final attempt that I decided to just keep going regardless if my health was low. At this point, I was locked in. I had wasted enough time trying and retrying this final mission. And so I made it to the end of the level within an inch of my life, meaning one hit was all it would take to kill me. We finally catch up to Rises for the final fight, and to no one's surprise, he takes me out with just one hit. Here's the other difficult part about this game. While dying in a boss fight does put you back at the start of the fight and not the level, it also keeps the same amount of HP we had. So if you make it to a boss fight with 1 HP remaining, when you die and try again, you will keep that same amount, unless you want to quit the game and try the level again. After several attempts, I managed to get lucky and catch Rises in a stun lock, but unfortunately, that's not the end of the fight. We make it out of the fallen colony and land on top of a flying carrier for the second part of the fight. The setting here doesn't make that much sense, to be honest. We just fell out of a fallen colony on the ground, but somehow we're on a flying carrier high in the clouds. Like I said, maybe try not to think about it too much when playing this game. And it doesn't get any easier, since I am at just 1% HP. Attempt after attempt, he gets me in one shot, and I stubbornly refuse to back out and replay the entire level again. I died more times in the second stage than all the times I've ever died in all other Gundam games combined. This boss fight went on for far longer than it should have, and I was only playing this on normal difficulty. I could make an entire video on just my attempts at this second stage boss fight alone. Admittedly, this was sort of my fault for not wanting to restart the level and try entering the boss with more HP. Eventually, I finally managed to catch Rises in another stun lock. Rises' cockpit is destroyed in the following cutscene and is somehow still operational. This is where we learn that Rises and Raven are actually one and the same. The entire time, we were fighting a mobile weapon.
Still alive? I'm invincible. Read.
And again, I have to say that this plot is a lot more interesting on paper than what we got in the movie. Unfortunately, this game's story fails in execution. Before the mission, there was also some mention of Rises having been formerly one of Reed's students.
I'll be there. But I'm afraid I may end up fighting with someone I'd rather not fight. It bothers me.
Someone you don't want to fight? You mean Race Patrick? The one you've told me about? But the name of the pilot in the black suit is Rises.
Yes, but they have too much in common. Race and Rises. I could be wrong,
But we never meet this would-be character, and so we just don't care. Way too much telling and not enough showing. Reed's dialogue doesn't get any better here either. I'm not sure if this was scripted or improvised, but this next line says it all.
Raven is a mobile weapon?
The bug is deleted. Next step, delete the enemy.
Shut the fuck up! No gadget will get in my way!
And now we have to fight Raven one final time. Now he's flying around the map and is hard to catch with the loadout we have equipped. I know I can't get him, so I resort to the one ability I have not used until now. I press circle and use the carpet bomb attack and hope to catch Raven in the trap as he closes in. And on the fourth attempt, I finally get him with one shot.
Was Rises your answer?
following cutscene, the G-Turret malfunctions as the flying carrier self-destructs, and we cut away to Osaka and the captain, leaving us to wonder if Reed made it out alive. In a more competent story, I may have actually cared and wondered if he would make it out alive or not. But for crying out loud, we know he's fine. To be honest, if he didn't make it out alive, I still wouldn't care.
Lightning, can you hear me? This is Reed. The battle is over. I'm back, Osaka.
Okay, so I know I may come across as a bit harsh on this game's writing, which I have to say is the weakest aspect to it, but I can't exactly call this a bad game. All the levels play well enough, and not once did I encounter any bugs. It never felt unfair whenever I died, instead of the result of me making some mistakes or being too careless. The mobile suit designs stand out on their own, and I feel are an improvement compared to what we saw in the film. Overall, I have to say that this game is just okay. Not great, but also not bad either. There are 8 chapters, with 2 levels being repeats, but they are levels, especially compared to what we tend to get in most Gundam games. Actually, in most mech games, to be honest. I consider the game to be average at best, with some fun bits scattered about. There is no New Game Plus mode, but there are some unlockables if you manage to pass every mission on normal with an A or S rank, and the same goes for hard mode. If you're interested in trying out this game, I would say that it is far from the worst out there. You may even enjoy it more than me. If you're someone who just wants to play it, so you can at least add another Gundam game to your collection, then I'd say that you'll probably get a little enjoyment out of it. If you're wondering if G-Saviour has any importance or significance in the Universal Century timeline, it really doesn't. It's kind of canon, but also not really. It's so far ahead in the timeline that it's completely separated from everything else that came before. So nothing confirms that it's canon, but also not much contradicts it. I sort of consider G-Saviour to be a bit of lost media. The film and game are there, but no one is really trying to dig them up, and I'm sure Sunrise would just love to take it out back and bury it. Anyway, that's it for this video. If you found this enjoyable, a subscription or like would be greatly appreciated. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.